man.
It's
Nobody
recorded,
has.
but no one's ever gonna.
And that's how it starts, Manny.
Oh,
I'm not including
and
that.
oh, you're definitely including that. Oh, yeah, you got the orange Coke. How is it? You like it?
It's pretty fucking good.
I like it. Right? It's good. It's not like
It's
turbo
good.
orange. It's
No.
not like Orange Crush, but you have that like aftertaste of that.
It's subtle
creamsicle,
enough,
basically.
and it kind of like hides the shitty taste of aspartame. So I'm all for it.
The shitty taste of aspartame. Fuck. Aspartame makes everything so good, man.
No,
That's what Coke Zero is fucking.
I wonder if it's like that gene, like you know how people when they have cilantro they taste soap.
Yeah, but
I'm
that's
wondering-
just basically genetic inferiority is what all that is. That's God telling you you're a mistake.
What the fuck, dude?
All right. So with that, welcome to Not Quite High Score, the podcast where we three cousins play make believe and discuss the world of video games, pretending to be adults for the pleasure of essentially Deep's girlfriend and brother. And if you're wondering if that's the same person, keep listening, and maybe we'll tell you.
Christ.
My name is Taz. I'm a father. Hi, hello. I raise children. One child, a daughter. She's cool. She sleeps a lot, so I get sleep. So I'm hyper like this because I have a lot of copying today, so it's pretty good. I'm joined by my cousins, Deep. He
Hello.
is known for having a third leg of sorts.
Why
And
the
then we
fuck?
have Jas, the
Hi.
man with the ass that just won't quit. Definitely will give you the most confused boner you've ever seen. But that
So
being
Taz,
said,
so Jazz has a nice ass. Apparently, I have a third leg. So you're compensating by having a kid. Is that what we're getting at?
I mean, look, we all have our quirks. What do you want me to say?
I'm just happy that this time
Manu is the successful cousin. He's smart. You know what I mean? He has 2 degrees. Clearly, when our parents came to this country wanting better lives for us, Manu is what they envisioned, and we're just kind of like, consolation prize.
Exactly. Well, like I'm just happy that now we were seeing the progression of laundry behind you. First, it was like chaotic all over the place. Now they're folded, and maybe who knows? By next episode,
There won't be
put
any
away.
laundry.
Yeah.
Guys, by next episode, there will be a whole other batch of laundry. Because the thing about clothes is you wash them on a regular basis.
Have you thought about just buying new clothes whenever you use them?
Remember that part where I said I'm a father now? I do things, man. I do laundry, right? I clean poopy diapers.
I'm
And that
assuming
shit's,
you're
and
also
you're
that
playing
stuff is
games.
like, it's not fun. Because she's on solids right now. And that poop went from being just like an inconvenient yellow liquid to now just being straight up the fucking peanut butter of nightmares. And so it's blowouts are not fun anymore. Put it to you that
That's a
way.
mental image I did not need.
The first time she had a blowout, this is like months and months ago when she still had like her sort of liquidy poop. I wasn't entirely sure what to do, so I took off the onesie and I trashed it. And my wife was so mad. She was like, why wouldn't you just clean it? And I was like, but it was poop. And I mean, I guess it makes sense because realistically, if I had to trash all the poopy onesies, not that she poops out of her diaper a lot, but it would definitely be
Apparently, it's a
I
thing,
would
and
have to
especially
budget
in your
for it at that point. You were gonna say?
apparently your car is the ideal spot for her to take a number 2.
It's the ideal spot for her to take a number 2, if only because of her positioning in the car seat, but it's also the ideal spot for her to nap because as soon as we start moving, within 5 minutes, she's just out like a light.
Just imagine them like like their daughter's like not sleeping, like quick get the car.
Honestly, dude, it's funny because I was talking to my mom yesterday, and she's like, "Yeah, so your sister used to cry a lot, and so your dad would basically take her for car rides around the block until she passed out, and then you would come home and just put her in the crib so she would sleep. 'Cause that's the only way to get her to actually proper sleep."
Cars and
I guess it runs in
babies.
the family.
I guess so, man. Shit.
Well, I'm sure you've also had time to play games. It seems like all of us we've been playing Avowed since that just came out this week
Spoiler
on the
alert.
Game Pass.
Yo. Yeah,
Shall
I'm on like.
shall we just do like a spoiler thing since we're gonna be talking a little bit about the game?
I mean, we'll try to talk without spoilers. I think
Yeah.
it's still we can have a discussion about it in regards to how we're liking the game without necessarily divulging too much. But I'm close to hitting the 30-hour mark now.
Wow.
and
Right.
liking it so far. I wasn't super crazy about the third area that you enter, admittedly. Um, Very beautiful area though, but it's like a big ass desert, very sort of rock cliff walls and stuff like that. And like, guys, the rocks in this game look fantastic.
Is that
But
third born?
yeah,
Okay. Yeah, I'm
um,
almost there.
yeah. So like that area is, it's a very nice looking area. But what really kind of annoyed me after a while was because it's a lot of cliff walls all over the place. There's sometimes very like specific routes to get to somewhere. So you can't just beeline it like you would in the first or second area because it's like forest or whatever. You have to kind of find a way around the cliff wall or through it or something. And sometimes that kind of just becomes really annoying because you just want to get to where you're going. And I feel like the enemy frequency is kind of amped up a little bit in that area. So you're constantly encountering like the weird thing is you're encountering bears, and I'm like, what the fuck are bears doing in the desert? Anyways,
Yeah.
and then skeletons and those infected people and all that stuff. But
Well,
aside,
compared so progression wise, Jazz and I are at the second area, and I
Mhm.
think Jazz, you said you're almost done with it.
Yeah,
In
I'm
terms
pretty
of
much yeah.
Okay, in terms of like ad variety, does it change much in the third area? Do they add more, or is it kind of more or less the same? Because you mentioned bears, and we've seen those in the first two areas. So I'm just wondering
I
if
mean,
it's
it's not like it's all you're going to be fighting, but it was kind of it was a talking point before the game came out on a lot of websites that did get to play it and review it. That you're fighting bears a lot, and that is true. Uh, that said, enemy variety is not massive in this game. You're going to
right.
encounter a lot of the same enemies in all of the areas, maybe with a little bit of a different sort of bells and whistles contextually based on where they are. But for the most part, especially once you hit a certain area, you're going to be every area has its enemy types along with similar enemies from the previous areas, but you're going
Hmm.
to be engaging with a lot of those same enemies a lot.
Right.
So eventually you will learn, okay, once I see this group, I need to go find okay, there's a squad of skeletons. Cool. I know there's a priest among them. I got to kill him first so he stops healing everyone else.
Mhm.
And then eventually I set the game difficulty to easy, not because the game was too hard, but just because I felt like sometimes these battles were taking a little longer than I wanted them to. And I kind of want to get things going because eventually I do want to move on from this game as much as I'm enjoying it. So I think easy difficulty is right for me. It's definitely not as much of a challenge anymore, but enemies still aren't like dying with one hit. So I'm still, getting to enjoy the combat system and all that stuff, which honestly I love the first person combat in this game. It's actually very good. I enjoy the weapon variety. I enjoy that you can mix and match different loadouts. You can have like a gun and a sword or a gun and a shield or whatever you kind of stuff you want to do. The wand combat is really good. It's very sort of Harry
Yeah,
Potter
it
coded.
the one definitely like makes you
It's
feel like you're playing Hogwarts Legacy, which is like fun.
Yeah,
But then this grimoires add like a whole variety of spells as well.
and it's really fun playing with both of that because you can very easily make a build where both of those styles work. So
Yeah.
I can, walk into a mob and I'll start with some melee, and then when I realize, okay, now they're all kind of grouping up, switch to your wand and your grimoire, launch a couple of AoE spells to freeze them in place, and that kind of stuff, and then switch back to your melee and just go to town. So the combat has impact and there's weight behind the swing of your sword and everything that you're doing, so it doesn't just feel sort of floaty like, let's say, like Skyrim. But then, on the other hand, ranged combat and just overall the fights and everything just feel very, very good and fantastic. So yeah.
I mean, some of the highlight
Yeah.
about the game is not so much like the mobs you're going to be fighting, but more so the boss. That's where really the variety comes in. Even the mini bosses, like some of the quests. One at one point, Jazz and I were talking about just before this. There's a quest in the first area where you meet another godlike, which is another being like you who's been like blessed or cursed by God, depending on your point of view. And Jazz, on the other hand, had helped him with his kind of endeavor. We're kind of trying to keep it spoiler free. I, on the other hand, didn't agree with what he was doing, so I ended up fighting him, and so
The
we
game
ended up with
tends to
like
do that. It I so I guess mild spoiler, I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is, but at some point in the third area, you're kind of the game narratively backs you into a corner and you're essentially made to choose between, two outcomes that neither really on the surface seem appealing, and you're not really gonna know whether it was good or bad until you've made that choice. And so it was definitely a moment where I kinda sat there and I was like, "God damn it." So then I could just put the controller down for a second and I was like, "Okay, like, what do I wanna do, and how do I wanna go about this?" Because you really do have to choose A or B, and neither of them seem appealing, so you have to really think about everything up to that point narratively and then be like, "Okay, so then based on what I know, what do I think, while these are 2 shitty decisions, what is the lesser of both of these evils
Mhm.
in my mind?" So that
And
is kind of fun.
whatever decisions you are going to make throughout the ending, from what I've heard, it does affect whatever choice you're going to make throughout the game does affect your ending, because
Yeah.
apparently there are multiple endings available. So
And
do be careful with that.
some of the choices obviously have more weight than others. I like, one thing that, obviously I'm also playing Avowed, but I'll kind of take it a different route. I actually enjoy using the companions a lot. Like I feel like the conversations that you have with the companions are great. Like I really want to know more about like their backstories and in combat. So like that's one thing that I really appreciated because the game really let me experiment different play styles. Like I started playing the game with the bow and arrow a lot, and then I kind of switched it to using the wand, and then I was like, you know what, like I kind of want to feel like I want to try out like the sword and shield. And so when I was playing with the sword and shield, I really started like pressing like on my keyboard to E to get like that wheel going, and then like tell my ally to, okay, like I want you to focus on the healer, for example, so that I can just go guns a blazing on the other ads. So like I thought that you know I really appreciate the fact that I can play different play styles with this game. The world feels rich. The story is fine. Like I'm about 10 hours, so like not like the 30 that Taz is putting, but to me so far it's a solid 8 on 10. And what I do appreciate, I don't know if you guys talked about the side quests, but I actually find that the side quests are a highlight of this game. I feel like they're well crafted. They don't feel like filler content. Like it doesn't feel like side quests where they kind of feel like a checklist. They actually do feel like it's a meaningful addition to the experience. And Manny and I did talk about one of the side quests that we had done, like the finding totems. And Manny had told me the benefit of actually doing that side quest, and then that kind of made me go back to the first area and try to complete that. So I think that to me it's like very classic Obsidian RPG feel. um Again, I feel like in terms of storytelling, I think it's fine. The game doesn't really reinvent the wheel, and I think a lot of I was reading some user reviews online, and a lot of people talked about how it just plays too safe, or it's like the typical fantasy RPG formula, and it doesn't really do much to push the genre forward. And I'm kind of curious to know what you guys think about that, because to me it's a solid 8. Not every game has to be a masterpiece, right? Like
Oh
not every
yeah,
game
but
has to reinvent the wheel. And to me, like if a game delivers something, if a game delivers a well-paced, polished experience with good combat, like I don't see why that's a bad thing. uh
like you, so like the highlight for the game for me, it's like it's the combat, and sure the story is
yeah,
interesting, but outside of that, it's like I don't care much about the companions at all.
really.
I don't find that there's much depth to them, and like maybe in my mind I'm comparing it to like Dragon Age, just I just recently played Veilguard, and then even games like Baldur's Gate, where it's like I want to know more about my companions. There was that drive for me to want to complete their side quest and to get to know about their kind of story and their involvement and how they play a role into all of this. Whereas this,
Mm.
it's like Kai and Marius, I think it's like those are the first two companions. I'm like, I just don't care. They're not offering anything unique and different. And like the game, while it's fun, combat wise, it I feel like it's just a game a year from now. If someone brings it up, I'll be like, oh yeah, I played it, and like that's about it. Like it's not something that's really memorable long term.
That's kind of it. I feel like it's a good isolated experience.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It is definitely a solid 8 on 10. Does it reinvent the wheel in any way? Not really. I mean, I think I even in terms of the companions, I think I even prefer them a little bit more in Outer Worlds than I did, in this
Mm.
game. But that said, it's still a fun experience. The combat's great. The world is fun to explore.
yep.
There's constant reason to go out of your way and just explore a little bit because you're always finding something, whether it's a new weapon, a loot of some sort, or even if it's just a chest full of crafting materials. Like, but it's it shows that they thought of the fact
Mhm.
that you would go out of your way and kind of go around and explore a little bit, and so I find that to be a very thoughtful thing. And then, in terms of the story, I can't say that I care all that much, but overall, to me, it's just the fact that it's a fun experience. It's a well-made game. It's a well-crafted game. There's no crazy bugs of any sort. There's no, microtransactions every 10 feet.
Yeah.
It's just sort of it's a good game. They went
Yeah,
ahead and they made a very good, very serviceable game, and I'm enjoying playing it. And again, it doesn't reinvent the wheel, but that's fine. Why does every game necessarily need to do
exactly.
that?
Yeah.
And I also switched the difficulty to easy, and not necessarily because I found the combat difficult, but I actually think that because the combat is so engaging, I want to try out different builds. I want to try out different weapons, different styles, and I get to try that too. So if anything, it kind of makes me want to take my time and try out like new weapons, like new styles of of kind of like playing the game. I remember at one point I was like, okay, really want to try to do this mission just hiding the whole time, right? Like kind of going in and like stabbing
Dude, stealth
creatures in
is
the back.
so hard in this game.
It
It
is,
is.
it
It's
is,
But
yeah,
it's so
ridiculous.
rewarding though when you nail
yeah,
it.
It's
100%.
rewarding, but it's hard to a fault because there's times where I'm just so above an enemy and they just shouldn't be able to, or just for the sake of giving me a good gameplay experience,
Yeah,
don't let them see me. But
It
they have
that
such a
sounds
field of view in terms of just from where they can see you and the distance from which they can see you that
yeah.
I'm
This
like,
is not Assassin's Creed.
yeah. But not that I'm trying to make it be. And for all intents and
Yeah,
purposes, I don't think this game is necessarily meant to be played in stealth. Like, I think it's an option for you if you're at this point a sadist, maybe.
I don't know. It sounds more of a skill issue
It is
than
not a skill
just.
issue. Dude, I love stealth in games, and, like, the few moments where I'm like, "Can I stealth this?" It's fucking impossible. There's maybe 1 or 2 kills in that group that you can get, but in no way is this a game where you can get away with stealth. It's a game where
yeah.
what you wanna do instead is put your points into perception and then use that in dialogue to avoid conflicts. Because there's definitely some boss fights that I have completely avoided by just talking to the person.
Absolutely. And so I guess overall, like, I mean, to be honest with you, I'm super happy with Game Pass. That just because if it wasn't for the game being on Game Pass, I don't think I would have picked it up and played it, right? But the
Same.
fact that it is on Game Pass and I feel like I got my money's worth. I will finish it. Like I said, to me, like I'm enjoying it so much. Um so yeah, it's just as Taz said, like it doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. A solid 8 is a really good grade. Like if I got an 8 on 10 at school, like I'd be happy. You know what I mean? So
Fair. So we're all in agreement that this game is
Yeah,
more or less an 8 on 10, but it's
I
a
would
good
recommend the play.
experience.
Yeah, for sure.
that's it.
Would you
Or
pay
if
full price
anything,
for it?
wait for it to
Last
go on
last
sale.
last point on this, would you pay full price for this game though?
No.
No,
Okay. So this is
but
it's
I
a
would
it's
like the
it's
first sale.
essentially it's a wait for a sale is what we're kind of
Exactly, but
Yeah.
like not even a crazy sale. It's not like I'd wait for it to go down to $5. Like if I saw it was $10, $20 off, I'd be like, all right, I've heard good things about it. Let's give it a shot. Like,
That's
yeah,
fair because considering the game is you're probably going to be playing it for 50 hours, it's if the game was like 50 Canadian dollars, I'd pick it up, you know.
well, the
yeah.
game you won't be picking up.
Monster Hunter Wilds.
Yeah, it's
I
look.
I was actually gonna say Wonder Woman, which,
Oh,
I mean, we
which,
could just skip Monster Hunter Wilds and
oh
just
yeah,
talk about
you
it.
know what? You're right. You are playing Monster Hunter Wilds. That is the hot new shit. Please do
Right.
go on. How are you liking it?
I'm actually enjoying it quite a bit. It definitely came into my Avowed time when the game came out, and I wish you guys were playing it too because it'd be so much fun to kind of jump into these ridiculous boss fights with just some of the most ridiculous weapons.
I mean, you
And
know what? It's like I was telling you last night. It's with all this discourse on how easy this game has become and how accessible that they've made it, which is it seems like it's almost to the detriment of veterans. That's what's making me be like, you know what? Maybe I could check this out.
but so okay, people are saying that the game's easy. I don't find it is. So, and there's a reason for that. So, like any Monster Hunter game, the first half of the campaign, it's gonna be relatively easy. Maybe if it's not if it's your first time, you might be still grasping how to play with the game. But I'm a veteran. I played some of the games in the past, so I'm walking into this. None of it's really hard, but now I'm at the point where they're introducing new enemies. They're introducing variants of older monsters in this, and they're a lot more intense. They're quicker, they're more ferocious, and the battles are actually hard. And so, yeah, no, I think people complaining that it's easy, I think that it's just kind of like they understand how Monster Hunter works, and because of that, it's easy in their eyes. It's kind of like someone playing a Souls-like game and they're walking into another Dark Souls or Elden Ring. It some of that skill does translate into the next title. So I think it's more of that than anything.
But just one thing though, because I remember reading that Monster Hunter Wilds was noted for its accessibility to newcomers. Like, do you
No.
find no,
So
not at all?
the previous titles, I don't think they were very beginner friendly. This one kind of streamlines a lot of that process and helps new players to kind
Yeah,
of
like that's
integrate
my
into the
question.
game.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So it is noted for being more accessible than its predecessors.
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
And so, like something with World, for instance, it's like when you get into that game, they don't really tell you how to switch weapons. They don't even tell you about the different types of weapons, or they don't even point you at the training area. Whereas this, they tell you where everything is, and when you go into the training area, it kind of like helps you learn the skills of every weapon. And there's even indications, even when you're playing, about like what combos you can do in the top right. So, and the fact that in this game you can have two different weapons equipped, and you can change it when you're like mounted on your companion, it I think that's a really good indication. So like I'm usually playing with the insect glaive, but the fact now that I can have a second weapon, I'm often forgetting combos and moves. And so that's also a good indicator for not only new players but also for veterans as well who are trying out different weapon combinations.
And what about in terms of like the gameplay? Like, have they kind of introduced any new features into the game? Like, just kind of in terms of like the combat, but maybe like outside of the combat.
So in terms of combat, they've revamped a lot of the weapons. They're more flashier. They're more fun to play. This in they kind of like made the instead of it being like a separated central hub, and then you like kind of go on missions and you're like going to the mission areas. This is all like one kind of seamless area. So you can go from, well, you do have different biomes, so different instances, but it's like between the camps and the hunting areas, it's like you can just walk out of camp and you're in the hunting area immediately. And then they've kind of added a lot of quality of life updates in terms of like now the map will show you like all the different things you can gather, all the things around you as well. You have they took elements from Rise where you had a wolf or a dog like you rode around. Now you have a what they call a secret, which is like this bird like creature, and it's where you can store extra items. It's what like has your second weapon as well. And so there's a lot of quality of life changes from the previous games that you're going to notice in this.
So speaking of the secret or the secret,
Yes.
now that's your that's your mount, right?
Yes.
So because this is not an open world, that's your mount. You use that to get to where you need to go. Whereas with
Yes.
Monster Hunter World, there was no mount, right? If I
No, there
remember
wasn't.
correctly.
Rise had a mount.
Right. So now if you compare this game's sort of overall map and map design to World, how does it differ, right? Because now when you look at Monster Hunter Wilds, you're having to design an entire area and an entire map based around the fact that you need to be able to get around with this mount.
Yeah.
Whereas in Monster Hunter World, you're either, you're running around, you're climbing, there's probably more room for little nooks and crannies and things like that. So do you feel
Yeah.
like this game suffers because of that? Because they had to design it with that sort of mobility in mind, or do you feel like it retains
If
that
anything, I
level
feel
of
like
like
the
the level of detail and that level of like, yeah, you know what, this feels like a world that is really lived in and very dense.
yeah. If anything, I feel like the world is bigger because of the fact you're constantly moving around with your mount. And one thing is like the what the mount allows you to do is when like usually when the monster when you're fighting it and moves around, now you can just mount your secret and that would automatically walk towards where the boss is. And while that's happening, it allows you to like restock items, switch your weapons. It allows you to kind of sharpen your weapons and drink potions to heal up and all that. So I think they took that element and they kind of refined it from Rise. And if and I don't feel like the quality of the biome suffered. If anything, I think they improved it.
Hmm.
And because we're talking about accessibility and the difficulty
Right.
and all that, and obviously accessibility doesn't necessarily equate to easy, right?
No.
Accessibility
Yeah.
just it just means you're making it sort of a game that's easier for someone to grasp, but not
Mhm.
necessarily play from a difficulty point of view. What do you feel like they've sort of like in regards to the people that are saying that this game is not as much of a challenge as World? Like, what do you feel like that they've taken away, if anything? Because I understand you're
I don't.
saying that it's a better explained game that they actually show you the weapons and they
Yeah,
kind of explain a little bit more. So it's obviously more accessible in that sense because now I'm not having to go and look at guides and stuff like that. But I guess in your mind, why do you think that some people are saying that this is an easier game? Is it
because I
the
think
fact that
it's.
it's better explained and that you're not having to kind of find all that out for yourself and there's
I think
a
part
little
of
bit
it
of that
is that,
mystery's gone?
but I think people are looking at their weapons that they used to play around with, and the fact that like every weapon's now flashier, feels more powerful. Maybe they think they're more powerful because of that. But in terms of like skill level, I think that's consistent with the last few games compared to Wilds.
Okay.
Mm.
And I guess the campaign is like 40-ish hours. Are you, from what I've heard, are
Well,
you
so
a good chunk of the way through it or?
I'm 11 hours in and I'm on the last mission before the credits. But once you finish
Oh,
the
damn.
credits,
Okay.
there's maybe like another 4 or 5 missions. So like 3 missions, credits, and then another 4 missions, and then it's like that's end game stuff.
Okay. Well, hey,
Yeah,
let's give it another week, and I guess next time we'll get a little bit more into it and see if
yeah.
this game
But
holds
as
up
it
still.
stands,
And
I'm definitely going to be following the game with the DLC. I'm hooked into it, and
have they already announced DLC for this?
there's nothing yet. But
Mhm.
considering the last 2 games, World had DLC and Rise had DLC, so we're expecting DLC with Wilds as well.
Man, they should have some
And
full
it'd be crazy
crossovers
not to, because I
probably.
think like Steam alone had like what 1.3 million players or something.
Concurrent, which is insane because that
Yeah,
essentially that automatically means that on Steam alone they sold 1 million copies. So automatically this game has sold more than 1 million, and that's not counting everyone on PS5, and then B
and
for a
Xbox.
million and Xbox, and then for 1 million to be playing concurrently. Like that's definitely
Yeah.
that's like what I think the sixth most concurrently game played on
Hmm.
Steam. I don't know what the top five are, but even that, like considering the number of games on Steam and some of the more high profile ones that come out, like impressive on their part.
Yeah.
Um, Going back to my previous segue, which you ruined because of Monster Hunter. Do you know what a game is that you won't be playing?
Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman.
Oh God, you guys guessed it. Um, I mean, just what the F, man. Honestly, I can't.
Yeah.
WB, dude. I
We
think we
talked
all
about
kind
this
of.
last podcast with WB having financial issues, let's say, after like their not so great year, and so
Hmm.
I mean,
they
look, I'd
just.
say I'm disappointed with Monolith closing. But that said, if you guys really search in your heart of hearts, do we really care that Wonder Woman was canceled? Is this a game that, all jokes aside, were was there any legitimate excitement for a Wonder Woman game? Do you guys really think that the gaming community, that there's a fandom out there clamoring for a Wonder Woman game?
I have that same level of excitement as for Wolverine, which is
But
I'm not super
Wolverine is
excited.
Wolverine. You look at Wolverine and Deadpool that came out, and in overall, I mean, if you just look at the cachet that a character like Wolverine has versus Wonder Woman, I mean, a Wolverine game makes sense. There is a very clear and distinguished and present fan base for a character like Wolverine, not to mention the fact that, they're eventually going to reintegrate that character into the MCU, so that's going to give it even more of a boost. So having a game that, let's theorize, will come out around that time, give or take, it makes sense. But now you look at Wonder Woman, even with James Gunn now heading the DCU, and so maybe he'll have another Wonder Woman movie at some point, which it's about to happen. But generally speaking, like, is there really you know a giant fandom out there that's heartbroken that this game was canceled? Like maybe in terms of, I'm sure it would have been a great video game,
Right,
especially
but it's
after the
like we don't
2020.
know what the game looked like. We don't know how it played. I was just hoping that it would have been fun at the very least. So it's like without any idea what the game was going to be, it's kind of hard to say
Hmm.
right
So
now, just because based solely on the
supposedly
IP.
rumors are that after that 2024 reboot that they kind of excuse me, that they did again, it was gonna be more or less like a God of War 2018 type of game,
Oh my
but
god.
starring Wonder Woman.
That
So
would
I
be
mean,
now
great.
and what's wrong with that?
you
I
know
don't know.
the
It's
Wonder Woman IP is like it's still pretty strong. Like I mean, if because if you look at even like comic book sales, the Wonder Woman series, has been at the very top. But I think you can't deny the fact that it cost them what $100 million, and then they scrapped the game. That it never made past the early development stages. Like I just feel like what the last like what 3-4 weeks we're just kind of getting like just horrible news from Warner Brothers, and it's not just Monolith. Like they also closed two other studios, whose names I'm forgetting. But there's a studio that's responsible for multiverses as well, right? And then again, like the fact that we're not gonna get another Middle Earth game, like another like Shadow of Mordor game, is very disappointing, and especially with the fact that the Nemesis system is still patented, and it's patented until 2036.
Do
Like
we do we think we're gonna see a game in the next by 2036 that's gonna have the Nemesis system in it?
it's a
I
great
guess not.
system,
I mean, they
but
wanted to so they
they
wanted
can
to
sell it.
integrate
They
it.
can.
They
They,
initially wanted to integrate it into Wonder Woman, right? So that was one of the big things that they had is they wanted Wonder Woman to use it. Now, how a Wonder Woman game would necessarily use the Nemesis system, who the hell knows? And supposedly that is one of the big contention points and one of the things that Monolith was struggling with was how do you integrate this into the Wonder Woman universe? And then supposedly again, once they scrapped it and they rebooted it at the beginning of 2024, they got rid of the Nemesis system altogether from that game. Now, it's a great system. It made complete sense in the context of Shadow of Mordor because it's like these orcs and all that stuff, right?
yeah.
But is this I mean, was it really a groundbreaking system as far as you guys are concerned, or was it just something that's cool, but it's not exactly something that every game necessarily needs or can benefit from?
It doesn't need it, but was it groundbreaking? I would think so.
I would say
And
so.
and the fact no other
Like,
game has been close to mimic it.
but to me, I get it. It's kind of like we knew that it existed, and it's not like we were clamoring for it. It's not like we were like, oh yeah, like they should really incorporate the Nemesis system in other games. But now that it's shut down, now people are being like, oh well, actually, it's a revolutionary system. To me, the crazy part is despite holding onto the rights, Warner Brothers, they never used the system in any of their games since the second Shadow of Mordor game. So to me,
Which
again,
I think was the last game that Monolith released, crazy enough.
yeah, it's
And then
but
when
the
that
fact,
game came out, there was a whole lot of controversy because it had a whole bunch of, loot boxes and stuff at the time, which then they inevitably removed altogether. But by that point, the damage was done.
if they're smart, like they should just license it to someone else. They should just license it to another developer. Like I'm pretty sure. I'm just thinking like like maybe you could do like a live service game, and you can kind of do like the Nemesis system, but like with actual players, right? And like that could be pretty cool, right? Like because the Nemesis system, what was cool about it is that you could remember past encounters with the player, and then that would create like these unique rivalries. Maybe they could do something like that, like, but I can't think of another game that could use an Nemesis system and it being
I'm sure they'll try to shoehorn it into their next Harry Potter game. It's but I mean, at
yeah.
this point,
I
yeah, they have it for another decade. They're not going to do anything with it. No one else can do anything with it. And I do kind of agree with you guys. I think it is a fantastic system that a lot of games, you know, in the right context could benefit from it. But at this point, not only can they not use the Nemesis system, supposedly they can't even use the term Nemesis. Like
That's such
Yeah.
a
it's
dumb.
just. And then with Monolith, especially, why
Yeah.
close down the whole studio? Like I get that you guys lost a lot of money on Wonder Woman. Okay, fine, but the studio is competent. They've been around for like 30 years. They've released some amazing titles. You
Hmm.
know, their last title obviously didn't do well, Shadow of War. And why didn't it do well? Because your executives and their dumbass decisions of trying to nickel and dime everyone. Let's go ahead and put microtransactions and let's go ahead and put loot boxes in the game, and that completely destroyed it. But then, who's going to pay the price? Obviously, it's the developers and everyone involved in that studio. And now you have a studio that has a fantastic legacy with if you even the Fear games, like I don't know if you guys have ever played Fear, but it's an amazing first person shooter. It's a horror FPS. It especially for the AI at the time when I forget the exact year that these came out, but the game, aside from the atmosphere and the overall gameplay, was touted for how smart its enemies were. So clearly, the developers of Monolith know what they're doing when they're designing enemies and the overall framework for a game. Well, you know what? Monolith has gone. It sucks. Let's move on to the next topic, which is PS5 Pro sales have, quote, fallen behind PS4 Pro in the US. This is a story from Andy Robinson on VGC. So essentially, PS5 Pro had a strong start from what we were told when we read initially when it came out, but now it seems to have slowed down a little bit and sales are lagging. And if you look at the sales of the PS5 Pro versus the PS4 Pro, 5 does not seem to be doing as well. Um, why do we think that is? I mean,
Well, I mean, number one, I think it's the price, right? Like the PS5 Pro is 700 US dollars, and I remember last time I checked on Best Buy Canada, it was like 960 Canadian. I've never seen a console priced at that point, right? And the PS4 Pro never got to that point. So I think price is definitely a factor. But to me, the other thing is just there aren't any games that really take advantage of the PS5 Pro. Like I think that people are pretty pleased with the PS5's performance that maybe they're not, they don't really have an incentive on purchasing a
so here's the
PS5
thing,
Pro.
right? When the
But
PS5, when the
that's
PS4 was out, obviously it was doing very well. But then there was kind of a reason, right, for the upgrade to the PS4 Pro, because then the PS4 Pro was kind of touted as like the 4K console, and this is around the time when everyone was still getting 4K TVs, and 4K was like the next big thing. Right now, there is no such thing, right? No one's really, yeah, I guess you could say there's 8K, but are there really 8K TVs? Is 8K really a talking point at this point? Is this I think we're kind of reaching
Exactly.
like real diminishing returns at this point. So, in that regard, there's no real reason. No one's really looking at their PS5, playing something and thinking to themselves, oh man, if only this was a more powerful console. So I think that's also a big factor that's preventing people from upgrading is just that there's not really seemingly a reason to. And if you look at even the presentation that they had when they revealed the PS5 Pro and they're showing you the side by
Mhm.
side of PS4 versus the 5 Pro, I mean, yeah, the frame rate is nice, but for most people, it's really more a question of the visuals and not necessarily the frame rate. And the visuals look very
Yeah.
similar, dude. I'm looking at them, and you would be hard pressed if you showed me a screenshot of both of those games for me to be able to tell you the difference between the 5 and the 5 Pro.
It's very minute, like, but and that's the thing, right? It's and I know that this is something that we can discuss even further, is because where does Microsoft come into the picture? Because you know they've kind of like more or less admitted that they've lost the console war, right? And to me, I actually see it more, well, actually Microsoft is focusing on Game Pass and cloud gaming rather than direct console competition. Sony is sitting in the lead, and Sony's going to be in the lead for, like maybe even like future generations. But the counterpoint to that is like, well, I don't think people are going to invest more in PlayStation. It's not necessarily because Microsoft said that. Well, they've more or less saying that they're kind of backing out of this console war, that people are going to buy more PlayStation products. Microsoft isn't really quitting gaming; they're just evolving, right? They're focusing on Game Pass, and cloud gaming, and they're making console exclusivity like less relevant. And I think Sony needs to be careful not to rely too much on hardware dominance, because you can also see that the industry is shifting and it's moving towards subscription based access. So you know if you look at like these companies, I still think that these companies are always going to be like head to head. But do I foresee PS5 sales or PS5 Pro sales going up because of this news? I Not necessarily.
I
I
mean,
don't know what you guys think
who
of
do we
that
think is better
aspect.
positioned, right? Because you have Microsoft on one hand that has essentially Phil Spencer, recently came out and he's like, yeah, we did kind of lose the console war. So in that regard, no one's really going to be going out there, I think, right now and wanting to necessarily get an Xbox. And even with their next console, if they release another one down the line, like at this point, I don't. That's not the major focus. I don't think everyone's gonna be clamoring. I think PlayStation has kind of you know taken its place among the consoles in terms of it's the king of the consoles, and then so you have the PlayStation for what it does, the power, and then you have something like the Switch, which, most people say it's not even part of that console
Mhm.
war. And I guess you're right, because the Switch is its own audience and its own thing, and that's fine. But then between Microsoft and Sony, who do we think is better positioned, right? Because if you don't have to worry about the hardware and your software is everything, so now you're not just restricted to necessarily making exclusives for one console, but you're making a game that's coming out everywhere on everything. Do we think that's gonna bring in more revenue for you in the long term? Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about, right? Because if you look at Sony, as many consoles that they have sold, and as much as they want to tout that they're the home of all these exclusive titles, you look at something like Rebirth that came out. Square was not happy with the performance. It was exclusive to the PS5 at the time, and then they came out and they were like, "No, this did not meet expectations." And then you look at a few weeks ago when it came out on Steam, and it's selling absolutely crazy, and it has an insane amount of concurrent players. So clearly, there's a big market for it elsewhere that they kind of missed out on when they didn't initially release it. So, is
And
Microsoft doing sort of the smart thing and taking an advance and kind of doing a better job of looking at what the future of gaming is versus Sony, where they're sticking more to the
e
console game that's more traditional?
absolutely, and that's why I was mentioning that, Sony needs to be extremely careful not to rely too much on hardware dominance because and you're right, like we talked about, active Steam users that are playing Monster Hunter, active Steam users that are playing Final Fantasy. I actually see people sticking to their PCs while using Game Pass to access Xbox titles, right? So that is actually another win for Microsoft. So, again, I think that the industry is kind of shifting, and it's shifting towards services and multi-platform accessibility. So at the end of the day, like, I mean, like, are we discussing like who's going to sell more consoles, or who's going to have, let's say, like, more
Well, I mean, I think
services?
it's no question who's gonna sell more consoles. It's gonna be Nintendo.
Yeah,
But, aside
of
from that,
course.
yes, if we're looking at it purely, is it Microsoft or Sony? It's obviously Sony. Like, there's no
Sony.
question you'd be an
But
idiot
even at
to
that,
bet
if
on
you take
Microsoft.
numbers into account, it's not like consoles are usually the main source of revenue for these companies. It's usually the games themselves. So yes, Sony's winning on that front, but look at Game Pass, look at just Microsoft in general, and they're doing well on PC. And then Xbox isn't selling great, but for them, it's just another revenue to be making more money on their games.
And I think that if they keep pushing for, like, their cloud service, they can maybe position it in such a way that, like, hey, you don't actually need a performing PC anymore, right? Like, you can have like a mid-tier PC, and through the cloud, you'll be able to play, like, the latest and greatest games, and it's going to be, and it's going to run beautifully, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's also like another household that they can tackle, and they can say, hey, Sony is selling their console for 960 Canadian dollars. Okay. We're going to talk to the people that are, let's say, kind of limited on their budget. And we're going to be like, hey, we have this great cloud service that you guys can kind of jump on right now. And you get to play the latest and greatest games. So I actually like the stance that Microsoft is taking, because again, they're not looking at it like this. They're more looking at it more broad. And I think that they're trying to go into more households, by doing it this way. So I think it's going to be interesting, because I don't think that they're not going to have another console. I feel like they're still going to make consoles, but I think the focus is really going to be on the service and the
And
multi-platform
to your point,
accessibility.
Deep, I think consoles absolutely matter for Sony. Because if you look at it, Sony doesn't have a service similar to Microsoft, right? So they have PS Plus,
Yeah.
but where do you get PS Plus? You have to have a PlayStation. That's where you benefit from it. So for that, a console
Hmm.
needs to sell. Every single game that's sold on PSN, whether it's a third party, whether it's a first, well, specifically third parties, there is a cut that goes to Sony, right? Whereas if they release their
Yeah.
Yeah.
titles, if I'm buying Ghost of Tsushima on Steam, 30% of that is going to Valve. So they're not making nearly as much
Yeah.
money as they would be if it was selling only on their console. So for them, there's every reason to be pushing their consoles because they might not be making a good margin on the hardware, but the software is really where it's at.
Mhm.
Right. But that the argument was more for like Microsoft backing up than we see the numbers for Sony. It's because like if Sony's doing so well in consoles, it's because well it's Microsoft's fucked up, and so at that point it's like Sony will capitalize as much as they can on their consoles. But it's like at the end of the day, it's like you guys already mentioned, if games are now releasing on every platform, is it very viable for Sony? Like, are they really? like we don't have the exact numbers, but like, are they really making the most amount of money like compared to like Microsoft and Nintendo?
I mean, at the end of the day, if you're selling copies, especially, let's say like GTA 6 when that comes out, that is gonna make Sony a
Yeah.
ton of money, right? People are gonna buy PlayStations to play that game. Now, whether it sells more PS5 Pros versus PS5s, who knows? But hey, a console sale is a console sale. And then the fact that they're buying it for that console, again, that's more revenue to them and not necessarily Microsoft in that
Yeah.
regard.
Yeah, no, so you mentioned GTA, right? Like, of course, historically, I remember when GTA 5 launched, right? The PS4 and Xbox One saw like a massive adoption spike, right? I expect history to repeat itself, but I think if you look at GTA 6 and the PS5 Pro, I think that if the PS5 Pro version doesn't significantly enhance the performance, like I don't think that we're going to see a boost in PS5 Pro sales. Like, are you really going to spend 1,000 Canadian dollars to play GTA when you already have the means
People
to
will.
play it
People There are
already?
people out there that have been playing GTA 5 online for like a decade now. Like that is their game. There was a whole other story that
Have you guys
sorry, go
seen
on.
Have you guys seen the leaks for GTA 6 in terms of like minimum
No.
specs? It was something crazy like you needing like on the equivalent of like a GTS 1660 and like an i5 and all that stuff. And it's like those are crazy specs, and I can't imagine it running optimally on like PS5 Pro, for instance.
I mean, I did
Or at
hear
the
I
very
did I
least,
did
locked
hear
at
a
30 FPS.
rumor that even on PS5 Pro, it was still not going to be 60 FPS.
Yeah.
So,
Jeez.
there is that to go on, I guess. But at the end of the day,
Rest in peace, our PCs,
I
I
mean, it's like I
guess.
was saying, this thing, I think it will sell. You're When this game comes out, you're going to see an uptake in PS5 sales, both Pro and standard. That is for sure. Because again,
Yeah.
people will buy a console to play this game. This is it's a once in a, not even a once in a generation, considering GTA 5 came out like it's a 360 game. That's when it initially came out. The Xbox 360.
Once in a
Yeah,
decade, I guess.
maybe if you're lucky, like, and so and
Mhm.
even there was a story recently where essentially 40% of gamers in the last year are playing the same like 10 free to play games. And that's what's really eating into the new game market, is that people are not going to go and pay like $80 for a brand new game when you can play something like Fortnite or Minecraft or what have you for free. And those games are actually very good. So like, no
Yeah,
no knock on them. But all that to say,
Yeah.
this is gonna, GTA 6 is gonna sell consoles, and people absolutely will pay the price to play that game on a PlayStation if they think that they'll get the best experience out of it on a PS4, on a PS5 Pro, because again, this is like gonna be their game for the next like 10, 15, 20 years. Rockstar has said that they want to support this game for the next like 20 years. So when this game is out, this is it. You're not gonna see another GTA for like a while. So people will spend that
right.
money because to them it's an investment in years and years of gaming, and so that's how they see it.
Yeah. But I guess, just to kind of circle back on the initial topic, which was this PS5 Pro sales, lagging behind those of the PS4 Pro, I think for me, bottom line, Sony needs to make the Pro feel like it's a must have. And so far, they haven't really had any argument
Yeah.
for it.
I mean, look, I think it's also translate to like the fact that we two out of three of us ended up selling our PS5.
Yeah.
Jazz, I think you still have yours,
I sold it.
and you sold it. So
So
all three of
3
us
out
have
of 3.
sold our PS5. But see, that's the thing. It's like if you compare the lineup of the PS4, and you know what? I'm sorry if you guys talked about this at the beginning. I blanked out for a second there, but it's like look at the lineup of games that came out throughout the lifetime of the PS4 and compare it to the PS5. There's not much
What do you mean? We have
substance.
like 6 remasters of The Last of Us now. There's so much to play on the PS5.
And Days
Days
Gone, guys,
Gone,
come
There's
they're
on
so
now.
much to look
remastering
forward
Days
to
Gone, dude. The
of all the
the
fucking games.
greatest 6 on 10 game you've ever played in your life. They're fucking
But see, that's the thing. It's like there's nothing that gets us excited for the
well, that's it.
PS5.
But
And
here's the
we
thing.
know that a matter of time, those games are going to come out on
May
other platforms. And like, besides God of War and sure, Spider Man, what else can you think of on the
Here's
top
the
of your
thing.
head?
Okay? We are 3 people that have been playing video games our whole lives. We are steeped
Mhm.
in the gaming culture, more or less. We constantly read about it. We're constantly
Right.
exposed to it. We have beefy rigs. we know a lot. We're podcasting about it right now. Hell, you know what I mean? We are a minority, a very, very small minority, versus the people that will buy this console to literally just play Call of Duty. And then on occasion, there's another God of War that comes out and they'll buy that. We can't, the fact that we sold it and we're saying that there's not much that comes out that's appealing to us, that is like, yeah, but that's just us. We are such a small minority. We do not represent the average gamer. We are
True.
not who Sony is targeting. We're not. We're not their demographic.
Right. But if you look at the hype of when the PS5 was announced, most often than not, people wanted the PS5 because they were coming from the PS4. But nowadays, even your general gamers, who's talking about getting a PS5? Who's talking about wanting to have that experience? It's
It's
kind
just
of
it's the
dead
hot
in the
shit
waters.
and kids want it. That's it. I think I
Is
think
it
you're
hot
definitely
anymore
gonna
though?
I
That's
think
the
you're gonna
question.
definitely see
It's
an
a
adoption
flex.
problem for, let's say, a PS6, considering how everyone these days is just simply playing free to play games, and for them it's hard to justify paying,
Yeah.
six, seven, $800 for
Mhm.
a PS6 when this game that's free is still running and I can still continue to play it on a PS5. So like that crowd is for sure gonna be an issue. But they're kind of becoming the majority now. And so they're the ones that Sony has to cater to, and they're gonna have a hard time doing it because, again, why am I paying for God of War when these other games are free and I'm having a perfectly good time with them? And I'm not Mr. Gamer that's been playing my whole life. I'm just looking for a good time, and I have a good time with this, and so we're good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to me, if I'm only gonna be turning on the console to play those two exclusive games that Sony releases every year, I'm not really getting my money's worth. So
Yeah.
that's
I
why, like
mean,
I said, with the market shifting towards service and multi-platform accessibility, I think Microsoft is pretty solid on that
to
end.
be fair, when the PS Pro was out, like I was that one gamer that all I played was Destiny with the occasional flavor of like the Kingdom Hearts, whatever game would come
Yeah,
out. Um, and I kind of bought into the hype and bought the PS5, but now it's like,
but
no, no, yeah.
but that's
But
to
that's
Taz's
that's
point.
the whole
We
argument.
are the
Yeah,
minority. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, speaking of minorities, guys, did you know that they're
Very
the
quickly, please.
reason that GameStop wants to sell off their Canadian and their French branches?
Love it.
Um,
Because of the
I mean,
minorities.
and this is a quote from the article, which also then goes on to quote what the CEO Ryan Cohen of GameStop had said. GameStop CEO Ryan Cohen seemed to take issue with the progressive nature of both countries. On this case, both countries being Canada and I guess Europe or France.
Oh boy.
Um, Requesting emails from individuals interested in quote buying GameStop Canada or Micromania France. Unquote. Cohen said that quote high taxes, liberalism, socialism, progressivism, wokeness, and DEI, which is God, diversity and equality, inclusion, something along those lines, included at no additional cost if you buy today, unquote. So, I mean, look, I'm not going to spend a
It's
lot
a
of time on
mess.
this story. All right, he's clearly insane. So I just want two things. I just
Oh
want
my
two things
god.
real quick from all of us. Now, number one, do we care if GameStop Canada were to go away tomorrow?
So I would say
Kind of.
no. I would say no. Well, okay.
At
So
this point,
I'll just
at
say
this
it
point
very
in time,
quickly
like
because
you walk into
bec-
a GameStop nowadays, right? And you see the Funko Pop museum that it has become, and the
well,
random
there you
plushies,
go.
and like that sort of half corner wall that happens to have video games. Do you care that this goes away?
I don't care because they've been struggling to stay relevant,
But that's the
and
thing.
their idea of relevancy was to have that Funko Pop museum with all these plushies and toys. And just to kind of end it, and then I'll let Manny talk about it. To me, the nostalgia that I had, like the
We're
good
gonna get
memories
to
that I
that.
had of GameStop,
We're gonna get to the GameStop memories. Don't worry, but that's all gone, right?
but it is all gone.
Okay.
Exactly.
But so
There's no
okay, but
nostalgia
like they
anymore.
they tried and failed. They even tried getting tapping into the Pokemon trading card market where they were like buying graded cards from individuals and reselling them. They tried to stay afloat. It didn't work, and often a lot of that could be attributed to like the loss in physical media. But it's kind of shit to see that because like even Best Buy, for instance, around us aren't carrying as many video games anymore. Walmart barely has titles on release day. And as someone who buys physical media, someone who enjoys to go to a store on release and pick it up, it's disappointing that it's closing down. Now, the fact that they're blaming it on all of these factors and not because of their own sell model wasn't like brought up to date, up to the times, they're just pointing fingers and like,
Pretty much.
yeah,
Okay. Now the other thing that I want, let's all just go ahead. Let's mourn the GameStop of old. Let's just go around. I just want one good memory that you guys had with this
Okay.
place growing up, because we all, because look, I mean, look, we've
Well,
all been playing games our whole lives. GameStop, at the time, EB Games is what it used to be called here in Canada. It was like
yeah.
our holy grail. It was our Disney. You walk into a mall, and the first thing that I wanted to go to was EB Games. And if even though there was
EV
nothing that I
games.
even needed at the time necessarily, if that was the case, I just don't want to go there and just bask in it and look at what's there and check stuff
yeah,
out. So,
I just think for me, I remember like as a teenager, one of the best times that I had was like going with you guys to EB Games, checking out the used games, like like the bins, right? Like when you were able to kind of go through like the used game, the used games, and then they actually had good trade-in value. So they had a thing where it's like, oh, trade in 3, get a new game, like, and that game was like, like a full-fledged brand new game that came out. So to me, like, like there was a magic to that experience, right? And I don't remember the last time that I stepped forth in an EB Games or a GameStop and had that same feeling. I get it. Yes, maybe I was younger and it, like money was harder to come by because, we were working part-time jobs. So like, when we actually did pay for like, for a full copy, like of it, like full price for a game, it kind of meant something. Maybe there's that part of it as well. But again, to me, the nostalgia of it was really kind of like going to EB Games with you guys and just kind of like finding like a gem in there, right? And I'm pretty sure like Manny, like that's where we found like time splitters for you guys, and
yeah.
you guys discovered time splitters, and like it was so much fun making up your own map and just kind of
Yeah,
playing that all four
we
of us.
abused the shit out of the game because back in the day, we barely had any games to play with, so we would just be playing the same game over and
Yeah,
over. There's this weird memory that I have of like going to the EB Games next to Taz's old place when he lived back at home, and it was like we were kids, and it was my brother and I. It's like we didn't really have allowances, but somehow my brother and I like piled up $5 bills, and we wanted to buy a controller for I think it was for the Wii or something. And we pick it up and like it's a used controller. It's not even like in a packaging. It's like a plastic bag that they put it on display. And we go up to the counter. And my brother and I are counting the $5 bills. And Taz looks at us. He's like, "Put that shit away," and he just pays for it.
oh man,
Um,
I think
I don't know. I have a lot of good memories with EB Games or GameStop. It's like downtown Montreal used to have midnight releases for a lot of the Pokemon titles. I remember they had a Destiny event with Taken King, and I was there like with a bunch of other people. We're all lined up. A lot of us are talking about it. Even when the Switch came out, I remember waiting in line on release day, even though some of us had it, and like we're trying to get like some of us had like the collector's edition of Legend of Zelda as well, or a special
mhm.
edition. And everyone's excited, everyone's hyped, and kind of I'm gonna miss those times because you kind of don't have those
I mean, I
anymore.
think that's what it is, right? I think GameStop is sort of a victim of the
Yeah,
times these days because now everything is very much
yeah,
digital, whereas back when it was flourishing, it was still physical media was king. And I think my
yeah,
best memory has to be when the original Xbox came out. My brother and I were like going from EB to EB trying to find this console, and then every time you walk into an EB, it was full of people, and you just, okay, you walk in and you immediately kind of get the feeling, okay, obviously it's sold out. We're not going to find it here, but everyone's there. Everyone's excited. They're buying their accessories. They're buying, all the stuff that and the extra games. And you kind of walk in and you see the boxes for the games and you're looking towards the back and you're like, oh man, Dead or Alive. What's this? And, Halo, what's going on here? And like, oh, there's guns and stuff. And it's a first person shooter on a console. What? Like, that's so cool. And, eventually down the line, I got to working there, and then there was the midnight releases. And, I remember I was working at EB when World of Warcraft initially came out. I remember like working my entire shift and waiting to take home my collector's edition of the game and just staring at that box the whole time. And people would come in and you have to. I remember I used to have to climb a ladder to like a really high up shelf to get the Xbox. And specifically for the Xbox, I hated it because that box was so heavy and I always felt like I was gonna fall off the ladder. So whenever I could, I would get someone else to do it. But honestly, just a lot of good times, man. A lot of EB games, I would walk in and I would just chit chat
Yeah.
with the guys that were working there, and it was common ground, right? You would walk in, and the one thing is,
It
if
felt
you're
like a
in there, it's because
community.
you like video games, and so you would chit chat with the guys that were, guys or girls, whatever, that were there, and you get talking about video games. You discover some new things you didn't know before. You discover some cool titles, and there is no place like that anymore, really. And if there is, then they're very hard to find,
Yeah.
and that's kind of something that I feel
And
sad that a lot of kids these days are gonna miss out on because it's not a thing. You walk into a GameStop now and it's not what it used to be. You walk in now and you're basically you go in, you buy your V-Bucks and you walk out. It's not the same as what it was.
it's also kind of disappointing
It's
because, like, just because we can order our stuff online doesn't make it a whole lot easier. From a collector's standpoint, it's like I often have to deal with scalpers. Like, I feel like I'm always fighting an uphill battle where it's like scalpers and bots are gonna like clear out items that go on sale, and it's like
You're so
I miss the
right.
days when you can just go into store and it's like a store will have an allocation. They're not worried about people just buying them all online, and it's like tied to your account. We can't just pre-order like 100 of them.
Yeah, I remember because like I was just about to mention very quickly, like it's the collector's edition. It used to be so easy to go to like an EB Games, let's say close to my
Yeah.
house. Actually used to be two EB Games that were like like a 10 minute drive from my house, and I remember wanting to get the Mortal Kombat what is it, Mortal Kombat X collector's edition,
Hmm.
right? Went to one EB Games, they didn't have it. Went to the one at Fairview, they had it. Just got it that way. I didn't have to deal with scalpers, right? Like it was very much first come first serve, and to be able to go there and then share my love of Mortal Kombat with like the person that was working there and like talking about like like loving to play with Ermac and Reptile and all those characters. It was awesome. Like Taz is right. Like we don't have that. Like it was awesome because you went there and it felt like a community and like a forum where you got to like discuss like the games that you like. But yeah, so like I'm definitely gonna miss that too. But again, so they're selling off their outlets. That doesn't mean that someone can't come in and buy it off them, right?
Yeah.
So we'll see. Like maybe like Imaginaire here is like is pretty big, right? Like they're really growing, and there's a lot more Imaginaire stores. And for those that don't know, Imaginaire, they sell trading cards, board games, just Legos, all that kind of stuff. So who knows? Like maybe they can kind of sweep in and they can kind of come in and maybe rename it EB Games again. Like that could be awesome and just kind of bring back that what kind of made gaming fun. But
Yeah.
again, with the whole digital, digital is king nowadays. Is that even going to
I
survive? That's
mean,
also like another
Like
question.
game could figure out a way to kind of incentivize people to buy digital media or at least become the one-stop shop for it. And like
100%.
definitely something that they recently announced was like bringing back the Pokemon trading cards. It's like they're no longer doing like pre-orders online. It's like if you want to get product, you have to come in store and do it. And that's also kind of to fight some of the scalpers. Like you guys have heard the horror stories of people fighting in Costco just to get some of that product. And it's like they do stuff
I
like
mean,
that, and then
you
like
should specify that it's for
The
Pokemon cards. Because when you
yeah,
say that they're
exactly.
at Costco
yeah,
fighting for that product, you make it sound like they're selling drugs.
no.
I don't know what Costco you go
um,
to,
Yeah,
but
just send
yeah.
me that address after the podcast. But I mean, look, man, that's you know what? It's sad. It sucks. Hopefully, at some point, there's another retailer that can maybe recapture some of that magic, while at the same time not screwing us over financially. Rest in peace,
Mhm.
GameStop.
Oh, you know we're gonna get screwed
Rest in
over
peace, EB
financially.
Games. Pour one out for a homie. Call it a day. Speaking,
I was about to pour out my can. It's like
but
not on my desk.
and you know what? Speaking of homies, man, I tell you what, God is a homie because he's bringing me a remaster of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4, and that's it. I'm just happy it's happening. We're good. Thank you. I know it's still rumors,
I am
and
very
I know that
happy
they
for
haven't
you.
actually announced it, but March 4th, which is 3, 4, right? 3 the month, 4 the day. We're remastering 3 and 4. If they
Mhm.
don't announce those remasters on that day, I mean, at that point, honestly, they deserve whatever they have coming to them. But for all
It'll be
That
a
intents
would
and
be such
it'll
a
for all
be a
nice
great
intents and
birthday.
purposes,
birthday.
I have every
Yeah.
reason right
Yeah.
now to believe that there is a remaster of these 2 games coming, and you know what? Fantastic news. I'm happy. That's all. I just want to mention that.
It has
It's
nothing to
not
do with
even
the fact that your
not even
birthday's
nothing.
coming up.
0. It is literally just the fact that
But
because the remasters of 1 and 2 came out, and then they dissolved that team, and they threw them into the Call of Duty or the Diablo mines to work on that game, and so at that point, when that happened, there was no hope, and everyone had just basically given up on a remaster of 3 and 4 ever happening, 'cause, I mean, obviously, this is Activision. They weren't gonna give us what we wanted. They're only gonna give us what they think we're gonna give them the most amount of money for. In a Tony Hawk game, they can't nickel and dime a Tony Hawk game. They have to release one game, and then you buy it and you play it, and that's it, you know? But the fact that now it's under Microsoft, which may or may not have something to do with it, I don't know. I'm not gonna speculate. I don't care. But the fact is, it seems like we're getting a remaster of 3 and 4. 3 is my absolute favorite Tony Hawk game of all time. 4 was also really good.
Is this how you feel when I talk about Destiny?
What?
Is this how you guys feel when I talk about
What?
Destiny?
Just, like, not giving a shit? Yeah. So
Yeah,
So, you know what? Yeah.
basically.
Really, really let that feeling sink in the next time you start talking to me about fucking Dream Falls or whatever bullshit you keep going on about. But, that's it. That's literally all I wanted to say is this game exists. I'm happy. Moving on.
And you know
There
what? We're
was
happy
okay.
for you.
Now
we're
moving on from
happy.
this,
Yeah.
there was a
Yeah.
Pokemon Direct. Deep, this is you, man. Just go for it.
And this is exactly the whole Destiny thing. So go on.
Right, right.
I'm gonna go take a quick
Well,
dump. We talk about. No, I'm kidding. But go on. This is
I mean, they had a Pokemon Presents on the Pokemon anniversary, and they showed a bunch of product. Well, like a bit of news and updates for all of their lineup of games and products. And the highlight definitely was Pokemon Champions that they announced, which we didn't get much details, but I guess that's coming at a later date. And then it was also. Well, I'm not sure if it was the official announcement, but we got to see Pokemon ZA, so the next title in the Pokemon Legends
wasn't the
franchise.
official announcement, but it was a
And
sort of the reveal because they had said that they're working on it, and that was
right,
about a year ago, and then it was radio silence ever since. And now that they've finally shown you what this game
yeah.
is, you can choose to be either happy or disappointed based on what you saw. I don't know. Uh,
I mean, compared to what we it doesn't okay. It doesn't look great, like in terms of like performance graphically, but at that point, it's like after Arceus, after Scarlet and Violet, I don't know what to expect. I'm hoping that maybe it'll run better on the Switch 2, considering that it's a fall release, and we're probably getting the Switch 2
let
in
me
the next
ask you a
few
question.
months. So
When you
shoot,
saw the trailer for this game and they showed you gameplay, did you look at this and for one
yeah,
second think, "Oh man, this is a Switch 2 game"?
I thought definitely the Switch 1 title. Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's gonna run at 15
Well, here's the
FPS, and
thing,
you're
right?
gonna
Is like,
enjoy
yeah,
it.
because so Arceus or Arceus, however that's pronounced, came out. That was kind of dogged on for the
yeah.
performance. Scarlet and Violet became a
Yeah.
meme for how bad the performance on that was.
Hmm.
Yep.
What are we thinking for ZA? Now, this is not a big open, it's an open world, but it's supposedly all taking place within the confines of this city. So it's not like you're
Yeah,
out,
I think it's
yeah,
Lumio
so you're
City or
not like
something.
out in the wild or anything. Now, do we think that that was a decision to then keep the performance in check because now you're not having to render sort of a big giant field, but you're sort of on a street and there's like buildings that if you pause the trailer at some point and take a look at these buildings, holy shit. The texture
I
on the side,
mean,
it's literally one giant texture on the side of the building of like the balcony and the window and whatever, and it looks like they just upscaled an N64 building. But all that
okay, no, okay, it's not
did
that
you
terrible, dude. Like, okay, I get it. You're
I'm
saying
not
it for the
dude,
jokes, but it wasn't
it's
that terrible.
look, man, they're
It's pretty bad,
obviously
Manny.
It's
obviously when
bad,
you're
but
making a
it's
game
not
like
like
this, there's
N64.
sacrifices, right? That building might not be detailed, but then the detail goes into like whatever, the character model, the Pokemon that you're with, this and that. But my thing with
Yeah.
this now is like, why aren't you guys taking any sort of a risk, man? This game just this visual style that they have going on is the most unexciting fucking mobile gotcha friendly thing I've ever seen. Like it's just sort of, you know,
Part of
play
me is
with the
like, is that
visual
the
style.
limitation with this? But it's like on one end, it's like, is that the limitation of the Switch? But then you look at games like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and it's like,
But not even that. Let's okay, Breath of
how
the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, obviously, yeah, they look phenomenally better than this game. But it doesn't even have to go there, right? They can still be smart.
it
If you look
doesn't.
at something like uh Link's Awakening, right? And like that
Right.
visual style that they had. Why can't you kind of go in an art direction like that, or just even an art direction like Wind Waker? I mean, I think Wind Waker looks better than this game, visually speaking. You know, like you
Yep.
can compensate for the lack
Um,
of power with a good visual style, but here they're not. I feel like they're not doing
Look,
that.
there's absolutely no defending it. Game Freak has been, in my eyes, dropping the ball every single Pokemon iteration for the last few of them, and the only reason why I wouldn't check this game out, whereas like I usually get Pokemon games on day one, this one I'm gonna wait to see how it performs because I can't go through another Scarlet and Violet. That alone ruined the like most of the game for me. And once I was done, I was like, I just need to get rid of this copy. Like I have no inkling to ever get back to this game ever again.
I mean,
I
I don't know, man. Like I don't know how on one end of the spectrum you can make something as amazing as Tears of the Kingdom, and then you're trying to make a Pokemon game, and you can't tell me that this is a more intensive, that there's that many more things happening on the screen than on Tears of the Kingdom, and then that somehow it runs the
Yeah.
way that it does.
So
they're just not competent
I don't think I'm not
developers.
gonna say that,
I wouldn't say yeah, that's I don't think
but
that's the
it's
case.
more I don't know.
Like
There's
graphical like performance aside, I like what they're doing with the battle system. They did take how like they had the open world aspect of like kind of battling other Pokemon in Arceus, and they kind of improved on it here where movement makes a difference in terms of timing your attacks and dodging, and it kind of like makes it a more Pokemon like immersive experience, and that is something to look forward to. I like how they're improving on past iterations in a way that this game feels like it's going to be a different experience
And I
altogether.
mean, look, in terms of performance, all we can do, these are all presumptions, right? We don't know how the game is going to perform. The
Exactly.
game's obviously not out yet. So we're just going based on past titles and we're kind of shooting the shit on that. So for all intents and purposes, this game could come out and it could be like the end all be all. Holy shit, this is actually the one they did it. This Pokemon game is amazing.
Hmm.
But all I'm tr
But the
all I'm
track
saying
record,
is it could be an amazing Pokemon game from a gameplay perspective and all that stuff, but it's still just so intensely unexciting to look at. You have a property that is just it's basically the most profitable IP, I think, on the planet at the moment, if I'm not mistaken. And yet this is the game
yep,
that you make out of it. If you look at that Netflix show, that the Pokemon, whatever it is. Yeah,
concierge.
dude, it is gorgeous. Why can't you
Yeah,
guys be like, yeah, you know what? Let's
unique,
take a risk and let's make a Pokemon game with that visual style. I'm not asking you to give me a,
100%.
a graphical powerhouse because I know that that's not what Nintendo is about. But then why is it that you can go and make something like Mario Odyssey or make even the Kirby game or make whatever Zelda game, and they have these amazing distinct visual styles, but then for your
Man, I take a paper Pokemon
but
game
then, like,
any day of
an
the week.
IP like
Yeah.
Pokemon, which, fine, Nintendo doesn't, like, own it or whatever as far as I'm aware. But, I mean, this thing, it moves consoles. People will buy your console for this game. It is
Yeah.
Nintendo and Pokemon are synonymous. Why are you not demanding more out of a publisher? Out of a developer?
I would love to just have a chibi version, like you mentioned, like Link's Awakening, if it means the game's gonna run 1,000 times better.
But do even
Fuck
do even
making it look
anything else. I mean, I had
realistic.
those dungeon games, Pokemon Dungeon, which, I never played them.
Mystery
But
dungeon.
it's
Yeah,
like I like that
they're
it
fun.
exists. Why can't you give me a
Yeah.
Pokemon, roguelike? Give me a Pokemon Castlevania style, like a Metroidvania. Just kind of like explore a little bit. Give me a standalone, Mario style platformer where you're playing as Pikachu and just make up some story as to why you're playing as Pikachu. Make it the next Detective Pikachu for all I care. You know what I mean? Like, just there's so much
They're
more that they could be
they're
doing with it, and I just feel like because this is just what makes so much money and people just keep freaking buying it, that they've just settled in and they're comfortable on this. They're just sinking in this super comfy couch of mediocrity.
well, that's why they're coasting with this IP because I know people that whenever a new Pokemon game comes out, they buy every single edition of that game. Right? So instead of paying like the I don't know 70 Canadian dollars or however much Switch games are right now, you're actually paying times two because you're buying both editions of the game. Right?
But
So it
maybe,
doesn't incentivize them to like change anything because it's like,
but
well,
maybe,
okay, if it's not broken, don't fix it.
but maybe it's another question of us just being the minority of like being picky with the games because most people I know like are just happy playing a Pokemon game. They don't really care if it lags or if it doesn't run optimally. They're just like, you know what, it's Pokemon. We're having fun. They're not thinking twice about it. And like,
That's fair.
yeah, I mean that's to consider too.
So basically, we are realizing in this podcast is like every single thing that we discuss, we're in the minority.
We're just the elitist.
I don't
Apparently,
think
we have
I
such
don't
high
no, I'm not gonna
expectations.
say we're elitist,
No,
I know. I'm just messing.
but I
I'm
mean,
messing around.
it's just we can't be the only ones. There's got to be some people that are in the majority that feel the same way that we do. They will
no, for
play
sure.
the game because
I
at the
think
end of the day,
expecting a
it is
game,
still an enjoyable experience. But just
but expecting a game to run just optimally, I don't think that's that crazy of an ask.
no. But
Yeah.
I
The
think
fact that fucking Scarlet and Violet crashed like a dozen times playing through it, that shouldn't be the fucking case, especially for a Nintendo game where the standards are so much higher compared to every other
I
company.
mean, look, man, this game's coming out. It'll probably financially perform very well. That
Of
said,
course.
hopefully at some point when they release a Switch 2 exclusive Pokemon, the first one that comes out, it will be something more along the lines of what we're looking for. But that's it.
Well, I'm also curious to know that if this game also comes out on the
It
Switch
probably
2,
will.
if the
I'm
Switch 2 is
guessing
out
it'll
by then. So I'm curious to know what the difference in performance
it's
is
probably
going to
going to be
be.
a decent performance boost. I'm guessing it'll, I mean, I think
60
it'll probably run
FPS.
at 60. I don't know that it's going to necessarily look that
Yeah.
Yeah.
much better, but the other thing too,
I'll
my
take a
but if
stable
that's what it
performance over
is,
shitty
that's
buildings
what it
any
is. If
day.
there's going to be like a optimized version in some way, shape, or form, it's going to come out on Switch 2. My question is, if I buy this on Switch 1, are you going to make me rebuy it at full price for Switch 2? Or are you going to do a more of a similar model to Sony and Microsoft where I pay, let's say, 10, $15 for the upgraded version? Now, I can already answer that question.
Taz.
They're not going to do that because it's Nintendo.
Exactly.
This is the company that wants you to pay 90
Right.
bucks for that fucking Donkey Kong re-release that they just had come out. So you know what? If you want to play this game on Switch 2, put it in your mindset that chances are you're going to have to buy this game a second time at full price. But again,
Once
all
again, that's
presumptions.
assuming that the game's
So
yes,
this
yeah.
could be a title that comes out on Switch 1 and 2 at the same time. This could be a Switch 2 launch title and a Switch 1 title. That's very,
Yeah.
very likely.
The other thing that they announced during the Pokemon Presents thing was Pokemon Champions. We don't really know what it is, but from what we can assume, it seems to be like the return of Pokemon Stadium on mobile
Apparently, it's
and
very different from
console.
Stadium.
We'll
I don't
see
know
how
how.
that
I
plays.
didn't look into it, but supposedly it's not an apt comparison. But that said, it is purely battle
Right.
focused, and I think it
Yeah.
taps into
Which was
it
basically
taps into your
Stadium. Yeah.
Pokemon Bank or whatever that's called. That if you've played,
The Pokemon Home. But like, so what I'm wondering is, and I guess we'll get the details of that because we don't have much to rely on at the moment. It's like, how will that fare for against people that like you have your intense Pokemon players that kind of breed their Pokemon that kind of like get the Pokemons with the best stats, the best move sets versus someone who's just jumping into it and playing more
I
casually
mean, I
and
think
might not
there's gonna
be
be, I
bringing
think
in
there's gonna
Pokemon
be
from previous
matchmaking of
titles.
some sort. I think Nintendo will figure
Right.
something out. I think they're very aware of the sort of types of fan bases that they have when it comes to Pokemon, where they have the sort of more casual
Mhm.
versus the more advanced versus the kids versus the older kids, aka adults. But either way, we'll see how it goes. This is what 20.
Yeah,
Was that this year,
remains to
next
be
year that
seen.
they said it's coming out, or did they
Uh,
even not say anything
Champions.
like?
I don't know if they announced if they gave us a date. ZA is definitely this year.
Alrighty, well, moving on from this, uh,
To our discussion
I'm
coach.
just gonna touch on one thing real quick. This is an article that I saw on Kotaku. Marvel Rivals is almost canceled over licensing fees. So the CEO of NetEase, William Ding, reportedly did not was against paying the licensing fees, and he even was like, "Let's just do our own original heroes." This game has 40 million players right now. So if you had your own original heroes, and this was a NetEase game that had nothing to do with Marvel, it would have been not a failure, but it
I
would not
don't think it would have
nearly have
sold.
been this. That's all I want to say on that.
No.
So discussing, actually getting to our discussion topic, AI in game development. So a lot of stories about that as of late. So we had one with Microsoft where their CEO said that they're going to have a catalog of games using their generative AI that are going to release. Steam recently came out with a new filter on the Steam store where you can essentially filter out games that were made using AI. Call of Duty, Activision had to come out recently and say that they had used generative AI in the development of that game, which was pretty obvious based solely on the fact that they had a
Hmm.
piece of key art where a zombie had 6 fingers. And as we all know,
Yeah, it was like part of the Christmas thing
yeah,
in
and then as
December.
we all know, the hands are kind of, more or less what you can look at for AI because it can just never seem to get them right. Joseph Ferris, who heads up the development of Split Fiction, had come out and said that essentially we should learn to work with and not necessarily against technology.
Yeah.
I mean, how do we feel about AI? Rod, to start this
Look,
off with, how do we feel about AI in game development?
so I'll just one thing, because right now at work I am knee deep in AI, and we talk about this every single day, and it's getting very tiring, because I do agree with Joseph Harris that we should work with it and not against it. So the key is using AI as a tool and not a replacement. So the way that I see that AI could benefit the gaming industry is that AI should handle things like bug fixing, asset generation, or even enhancing something like NPC intelligence. So not replacing human written stories or handcrafted world building. I don't want that in my video games, right? But when it comes to like letting the AI take over the technical and iterative aspect of it while leaving the core creative decisions to human developers, I think that's the way to go.
But
So
even
AI
asset
can
generation
assist.
is
Well,
kind of like put an asterisk there because it's like you don't want cases like with the whole cast of like the voice actors for like that recent Call of Duty game that had like collectively quit because um it wasn't in their contract that like they weren't gonna that their voice work was gonna be used in kind of AI generative and then like they weren't properly compensated for that.
yeah. Yeah.
So like
So the way so it well the way that I was thinking, I was not even thinking about, like, let's say, the voiceovers, because no, you need human beings for that. I think for me it's more like, okay, if you have someone that's working on generating environments, right? Like that's your sole purpose. Like you're making Mortal Kombat and you're basically generating the environment in the background, or you're working on the crypt, and it's like super vast, and like you have to like generate all of these things. Maybe AI can assist you in generating some environments. Like that's kind of what I'm trying to say. It's like it can help with like you should always use it as a tool and not something that's going to be like, oh yeah, like this is clearly going to replace the way we do things, right?
yeah.
So if you go into that mindset, I think that you can successfully integrate AI. And
And it
while
also
yeah,
depends like how you're kind of feeding like if you're doing generative AI for assets and stuff, it depends what you're feeding into it. Like if you're just doing like if you're just taking content from the internet, then that's basically plagiarism. But whereas we have artists dedicated that are feeding the what the assets, the art style, the map, the terrain is gonna look like, and they're making it and then they're feeding into this AI to, like you said, to kind of facilitate that work, that makes sense.
yeah, and another thing that I can think of is, maybe AI can also improve enemy behavior. So, like, let's say for example, you're playing Elden Ring 2 or something like that, right? And it uses AI, and we know that because the devs talked about it and whatnot. But the way that they approach it is like, well, actually, we're using AI because we want to make combat encounters feel more realistic and challenging. So it's like, instead of predictable enemy patterns, the AI actually adapts to your strategy. So it's not so it's kind of it's interesting, because usually, like, let's say you're playing a game, you kind of have a boss battle, right? You're probably going to die like 67 times before you finally figure out like how to defeat that boss. But wouldn't it be interesting if the boss could do the same thing with you?
Yeah.
Right? Like I think like that could actually bring something different and something interesting to video games, and it's actually going to make every fight unique. So if Taz plays Elden Ring, right, like maybe his boss battle is going to feel different than, for example, myself, because I suck at those kind of games. So maybe the boss is going to be a bit more, forgiving, let's say. So I think we have to be careful in how it can be used to enhance the player experience. But I see some positives in it too. Like, again, like as I said, we shouldn't be afraid of it. We should just learn how to
Okay,
harness
now
it.
that being said, these
Okay.
companies, right? That these, and when I say these companies specifically, obviously in this case, contextually, we're talking about gaming developers, publishers, and so on. That these companies that have in the last year laid off a record number of employees, that shut down studios when something is not doing, you know, even close to whatever their crazy projected sales are. That their only point of existence is in this capitalistic society. They're here to make their shareholders money, right? Do
Hmm.
we really, really think that they're not going to try and find a way to replace as many people as they can and then revert to using AI in order to save the money? If it's feasible,
Yeah, but that
if it
doesn't,
is feasible.
even if they could, that doesn't necessarily mean that using AI in your product is going to make it a good product. Because, okay, first of all, there's such a, as a developer, there's such a big fucking misconception around AI, first of all, that it doesn't innovate. It takes things that are already there and regurgitates it, restructures it, suggests new model. Doesn't suggest new models, kind of like takes that and suggests a different model from it. But it doesn't make new things that are like that a human being can make. It's not
Hmm.
true art, like it's not true AI, and that people don't understand that right now.
Right. So obviously it's not going to create anything new. It's only going to learn from what's already out there.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But now going back to the fact that we're the minority, we're constantly looking for newer experiences because we play a higher volume of games than, let's say, the majority of people out there that maybe their main game that they're going to play year round is Call of Duty, Fortnite, this or that. People that are not necessarily looking for new experiences, just maybe more optimized experiences of what they already experienced, or just maybe something similar to what they play but different. A Call of Duty, but that's not necessarily Call of Duty. It's a different kind of shooter, different kind of world, time, whatever.
Right, but even
Because
even
they
Call
are
of
the
Duty
ones because they're
suffers
the ones that are
from,
bringing in the money, the most amount, right? They're the ones that are buying battle
no, I
passes,
for
buying those
sure.
microtransactions.
Hmm.
They're the ones spending hundreds, thousands of dollars on these games. They're the whales, the ones that the developers are really going after. At
But even Call of Duty suffers from content that's being regurgitated. Because like eventually
suffers
there's
how?
been a drop of players over the years. There's been a drop of players over the years, and like there's some iterations of Call of Duty where it's like none of the fans were impressed because it's just
Hmm.
the same old thing, nothing changed, nothing added, and that alone is going to be a reason for people not to want to play. If you tell me a game is created purely with AI and it just takes a game like a Call of Duty game and it remade this and just more optimized, I guarantee it. There's gonna be a
Okay.
loss in players.
So, can I tell you something? For
Sure.
2024, you know what the highest selling title of the entire year was? It
Don't
was
tell me
Call
it's
of Duty
God.
Black Ops 6.
Yeah.
If
2024, really?
Look, okay.
that game
So
came
I
out,
think
that game
that
comes out historically around what? October, November? Somewhere around there. So,
Hmm.
it's still up there. And is it a brand new experience every year? No, there's tweaks. There's a couple new features. Yeah, sure. But can you say that there's anything that they added to it in the last, let's say, 5 years that you've never seen before in gaming? No. So then that brings me back to my point of, as much as we want to discuss that, yeah, this AI should be used as a tool and not as a replacement for a human. Based on history and based on the greed of these corporations, like it's a negative, shitty like outcome that I don't necessarily
yeah,
want, but I do feel like the moment that they know that they can replace us, that they're not gonna need to pay some developer X amounts of thousands of dollars per year, and they can instead rely on AI, they will. As much as they wanna say otherwise, they're gonna do it.
you know what? So, but that's true, Taz. I mean, like, but I feel like I can say that we can say that for any other example
Yeah.
as
It's
well.
not just
Like,
this
what
I'm
I
not
think
saying
is
it's
going to be
contained to
super
this industry,
important.
but I'm just saying that
Yeah, yeah. But
in a
it's
capitalistic society, it is what it is.
yeah. But it's just that, like, I think that either you jump on the train or you're going to be so far behind. And I think the most important thing that they should be doing is, I may be using the words wrong, but if you make, let's say, an AI code of conduct, right? Like you make it a rule where, like, this is how it's supposed to be used, right? It's kind of like, music and streaming music, right? Like, for a fact that you should not be technically downloading said music from like a streaming site, because it's in the terms and conditions. So if they had some sort of AI code of conduct, I think that that could maybe help with the fear of like, AI is actually going to decrease employment in the gaming industry. Because again, the way that I see it is that these developers, they already work more than 40 hours a week, right? Like we know that that it's a grueling, tasking industry to be working in, right? So if the developers can shift focus from their repetitive tasks such as debugging and basic animation and asset polishing, like just an example, like let's say you're making an open world game, right? Your developer is probably spending countless hours on basic level design. But if you introduce AI, if you introduce procedural AI tools such that the AI can generate the entire landscape in minutes, it frees up the artist to actually refine and add personality to the world rather than having to spend all those hours on basic level design. Like, I think that an AI code of conduct is going to be super important. That if this is going to be a trend in the gaming industry, I feel like this is something that should be written on paper, and after that we can kind of have the assurance that like, hey, we're using AI for good. We're not actually using AI to replace human beings or use AI driven voice synthesis or something like that to replace human voiceovers, sorry, voice actors. I think that we can find that balance, but I think it starts with a clear, code of conduct. And like I know that at least in like the software industry, like Microsoft and they have their own AI code of conduct and everything like that. So it's not something that's unheard of, but it's gonna take someone to kind of bring that up and kind of install that in the video game industry. Because if not, it's gonna like like the fact that the Microsoft CEO said that the Xbox is going to have a catalog of games using generative AI. That's
I think
ridiculous to me.
that's probably him talking a bit out of his ass, trying to play up their AI model. So, I don't really
Yeah.
think that a whole lot's going to come of that, at least not in the near future. But then, let me put something else towards you, right? So recently there was an article that came out. Essentially, the entire French cast of Apex Legends is refusing to work with EA. Now, why? Essentially, EA sent them all new contracts that were amended, and that contract stated that EA would be allowed to use their voices to train AI.
Yeah, that's
And so now the entire cast refused to sign. They're not going to work with EA because of that one fact on it, which makes sense. Because why would I work for you if you're going to essentially then be using my work to try and replace me? So this kind of thing, this kind of mentality that I'm talking about, where they're going to try to replace us at every possible scenario. I mean, it's already in play. And I think it's up to the players at this point because we are, in the end, their main source of revenue. I think it's up to us. Things like on Steam, letting us filter out games that use AI, put that feature in PSN, put it on the Xbox store. If I don't want to support this kind of thing where, people's livelihoods are essentially taken away from them because now you want to, spend less and replace them with AI,
mm.
then I don't want to support you. So let me go ahead and see the games that actually don't allow a company to do that, and then that way I'm not going to give you my money. Let that. But again, it's just I can hope that people will take a stand. I guess it remains to be seen.
I do wonder if the sales of COD 6 were affected when all these kind
I mean,
of
that just recently came
things
out,
came to light.
right? So we'll see how it goes
Yeah,
going forward. Will they be affected? I don't think it's going to be enough to knock it out of the top spot in terms of sales. You know what I mean? I don't think
right.
anyone's going to not buy it next year necessarily. I mean, hell, we all had a fantastic time playing it. We played it for a while when it came out. It was on Game Pass,
Hmm.
so we tried it. I don't think I would have paid full price for it in a million years because I'm not a COD player, but we all tried COD 6. It's
Yeah,
amazing. So it is a great game. It's just a shame that, they do things like this. But
It's an interesting discussion for sure, because it's like nobody has the answer
yeah,
to this, right? Like I mean, it's the same thing even in movies, right? Like in cinema, like there's the use of AI, like de-aging actors. That's done using AI for sure, AI tools. Creating visual effects. It's prominent, and it's everywhere. So the way that I would do it is, for example, us at work, if we use generative AI to do anything, we have to make it clear in writing that, hey, this the use of generative AI was used like to generate this text or to generate this email or something like that. just make it, like be transparent, I guess, at that point. Like be transparent about how you are using AI, and just kind of make it obvious, so then let the player choose. But again, I think that we can find the balance. But and actually, I do agree, because I know there's a Strauss Zelnick that said that AI would increase employment. I do agree with that. Like I think that it is very, very possible that, that we'll actually have more, like, maybe AI specialists that are going to be hired to go and like refine what the AI has generated in video games. So, I can actually see an uptick in employment, and not actually people losing jobs.
Uh, I mean,
But
that's
we'll
just it.
see. We'll see.
There's
It's
no
yeah,
conclusions to be drawn. It is very much a we'll see.
Yeah.
Just like hopefully we'll see
yeah.
you in the next episode, right? So I think that's a wrap for
Wow.
today. I think we've had some
Damn.
fantastic discussions. Thank you, boys.
Chef's kiss.
For anyone that made it to the end of this episode, Deep's girlfriend and brother are in fact separate people. Um, so
Oh man.
Plot twist.
congrats on
Yeah.
making it through and getting to this point. And you know what? If you're still here, send us an email. Maybe just say hi. Ask us how we're doing. You
Yeah,
know,
how's the
sometimes
inbox looking, Manny?
sometimes I want to be asked how my
You know,
day
I haven't
was.
checked it.
Wait, you don't check the inbox every single day? Like we
At
might
not
have
quite high
we
score at
might be
gmail.com. No.
swamped right now with so many email
Guys, it's
requests.
not quite high score at gmail.com. Simple as that. It's long, but it's easy. It's like deep. You know what I mean?
Well, okay. Well, all
uh,
right.
All right. Thanks
Take
for
care.
listening.